the blocks of Barcelona are immediately recognizable. Every element of them was meticulously designed, and they are nothing like the Barcelona that came before, which was the densest city in Europe. This grid not only reshaped that city, but it marked the beginning of modern urban planning. So I want to look at that original plan and understand how this happened. The capital of Spain is Madrid. Barcelona is a city on its eastern coast, but it's also the capital of Catalonia, an autonomous region with its own language and culture. And the tension between these two played a huge role in how this city looks.
My name is Judith Urbano. I'm a teacher. I'm an associate professor in the Universitat Internacional de Catalunya in the Faculty of Humanities.
Your last name, I feel like, lends itself to what you do.
Well, it has nothing to do with that. But we have natural constraints, geographical ones, that are the sea. At the other side, we have Collserola Mountains. At one side, we have a river that is called Besòs. And at the other side, we have another river that is called Llobregat. So we have these natural constraints, and Barcelona cannot grow more now.
What was that first river called?
Besòs.
Like kisses?
Yes, but it's not that. Because Besòs is the accent is in the E, Besos, right? And here is Besòs.
Oh, okay.
That's the name of the river.
The city is clearly divided into two distinct sections on the map, but even within the old city, where the streets are much more irregular, there are development patterns that happened over centuries. The city was founded by the Romans in the 1st century BC, where they laid out their standard town plan, which is still visible from above. And one of the gates to this town is still standing.
You have here the round towers of the Roman wall that indicate that here we have the entrance, right? Because the other towers, if you see, are square. Of course, we have lost also a lot of this Roman wall. But this is one of the places where you have the evidence of this Roman wall, the original one. And this was the most important entrance, the entrance of the street that they call the Cardo, the Cardus. And then you have another street that crosses the Roman Barcelona that is called the Decumanus. And also in those extremes, you have two other doors. So at the end is 4 doors only for the city. The rest was the wall.
Where these met was the Forum. And this wasn't a huge city. It takes like maybe 10 minutes to walk across.
In the 13th century, we have a lot of people living outside the wall. We call it villas, that means like villages, that appear around. So they decided to do another wall because the Roman wall was very small and couldn't protect all the people that was living here. Medieval, this time, in the 13th century.
The western edge follows the path of a well-known road today called La Rambla.
La Ramblas is an Arabian word that means like small river. In the occidental part, in the western part of La Ramblas, people begin to have orchards, appear some monasteries, appear some churches, and people also begin to live there. So of course, in the 14th century, they had to protect again this part of the city. And then in the 14th century, you have another wall all around. This more or less is how Barcelona has been growing and growing.
This piecemeal pattern isn't ideal from like a layout perspective, but it's really natural as the population grows and people get added to the city. But after this second expansion, the city wouldn't expand again until it was long overdue, and it was artificially constrained within its own boundaries. So the boundary of this old town was drawn this way in the 14th century, and it stayed that way until the 1850s. So should we enter this city like we would have?
Let's enter the Decumanus, Oh, it's plenty of people doing noise today. We have to imagine that in the time of the Romans, the streets were wider than this. Because the Roman city is down. This is medieval.
You can still feel the medieval city with its narrow roads that meander and end abruptly. Even though the boundary stayed the same, there was technically two expansion projects that happened during those 500 years. One was for the seawall and the other was for the citadel. The seawall was to protect from outsiders and the citadel was to control the insiders. And this citadel represents the tension between Madrid and Barcelona, which again is the capital of Catalonia. There had always been some tension about who was in charge, but in the 1700s, all of the inbreeding in royal families came back to bite them when Spain produced the most inbred monarch probably ever, Charles II. And he did not have the physical ability to have children. The narrow gene pool did its thing and he couldn't produce a child. So a system built on family lineage now had a problem. When he died, the War of Spanish Succession began. A huge question was being asked of who would fill his spot. By the end of this war, Barcelona had chosen the losing side. Madrid took back the city with the Siege of Barcelona, which there's still a memorial for in the city. So Madrid wanted to regain their control of the city by imposing a military presence. Thus, the citadel was built. In a pretty aggressive move, the citadel was created by demolishing one of the busiest and most populated neighborhoods in Barcelona. It served to intimidate and would occasionally fire on Barcelona in times of uprising. And this is when the walls really turned from a defensive measure to a restrictive measure. It's been described as a corset that cinched the city in tightly, diseases and all. What's crazy, though, is that this happened during the time of the Industrial Revolution. So as more jobs were generated in the urban center, it attracted more outsiders, and the population grew rapidly, even when the city didn't. The population went from 55,000 people to 170,000 people between 1800 and 1850.
So in Barcelona at that moment, we have factories, we have very narrow streets. The hygienical conditions then were not very good. In these narrow streets, as you see, we don't have the sun, we don't have good air. Yeah? We have cholera, disease, pandemics in the 19th century that kill a lot of the population of Barcelona.
It was at this point that Barcelona became more than twice as dense as Paris at the time, which is pretty intense. And you might be thinking, why don't they just move on the other side of the wall and live outside the city like they had in the past, and then maybe the expansions would include them one day? And there's actually a reason for this. In addition to building the citadel, the government of Madrid also imposed a firing range where no building or construction could happen. Supposedly, this distance was determined by how far a cannonball could fly. This meant that if you weren't going to be within the walls of the city, you weren't going to be part of Barcelona at all. And the city was literally suffocating because of it.
So we have Pere Felip Monlau that wrote this paper in 1841. This is the title. Abajo las murallas means we have to demolish the walls.
This might not seem that bold at first glance, but it was as much a political position as it was an urban proposal. Over the following decade, unrest over living conditions escalated, and in 1854, Madrid finally authorized the demolition of the walls. The people of Barcelona started tearing it down themselves, and another decade later, the walls of the citadel came down.
And this fortress, when this was demolished, they opened a big park where in 1888 we have a big international exhibition.
Now that the walls were down, there was a huge area of open, unoccupied land directly around the city.
So the idea was we have to demolish these walls that are constraining the city, and then we have to expand and make a plan with wider streets and hygienical conditions.
In order to do this, they created a competition in 1859. Whoever could design the best layout would have it built.
In Catalan, eixamplar means to expand. For this reason, it's the Eixample.
And there were specific requirements for this contest. They needed to connect the city to the surrounding villages and give space for gardens and public spaces. They also needed to integrate the old town and relieve some of its pressure.
Here we can see some of the projects that were presented. Francesc Soler i Glòria, for example. Also this one by Josep Fontserè i Mestre. Or this one by Miquel Garriga Roca.
And after 13 entries of different plans for what the city could be, Barcelona made their choice.
The winner was Antoni Rovira i Trias. That was another architect that made a plan that was what we call a radial plan. This means that the center is the old town, and from this center we have different avenues, like the rays of the sun, that appear there, and they are connected by other streets.
Sadly, I didn't realize that this statue existed while I was there, so I didn't get to go say hi to him. But if you are in Barcelona or visiting Barcelona, go say hi to him for me. But you'll notice that his map is not what Barcelona looks like. How rad is this globe I just put together? If you're watching this channel, it's probably zero surprise that I love education and learning. And that's why I'm stoked that today's sponsor is KiwiCo. I just put together this globe that has a magnifying glass and a rotating gear system, all out of one of the KiwiCo crates. Whether you were just born or you're 100 years old, there are KiwiCo crates with activities geared toward your age group. This globe is just one of the many crate options they have, and it's this perfect example of how mapping a sphere onto a flat surface works, and that's something that's hard to understand but is super clear if you do it yourself. Whether it's art and design or STEM, these crates can get your brain and your hands working on something that's actually engaging, that isn't just information washing over you, but is something that you'll physically create, that is high quality, that you'll want to keep around. This isn't something I'm going to just make once and throw away. Are you kidding me? I'm going to be hanging on to this. During this holiday season, it's a perfect gift for the little ones in your life, and you can build it with them and watch them light up and learn about something you're interested in. And if you use the code Steiner at checkout or go to kiwico.com/Steiner, you can get 50% off the first crate. Huge thank you to KiwiCo for sponsoring this video. If you check out that link, it will help support this channel, and the young ones in your life, their brains will be thanking you in the future. So let's get back to the map of Barcelona. The Barcelona that is so recognizable that we can go walk around today is the result of a Catalan engineer, Ildefons Cerda.
And he was a military engineer and had worked a lot for the government of Madrid. The government of Madrid sent him also here to Barcelona, and he was working in the city council, and he was asked to do the topographical plan of the city, because of course they begin to move in order to demolish the walls and to do a new plan.
The map that shows these lines for the firing range is the one that Cerda created. He drew in great detail the topography and the villages around the city. And this was actually the base map for all of the competition entries. But along with creating this survey, he also deeply studied the conditions of the old town. Like, deeply studied it. He found that the life expectancy of someone in the wealthy class was about 39 years old, while someone in a poorer class had the life expectancy of 20 years. Not great. He took everything that he learned and created his own plan. And despite the competition that Barcelona had created and the winner that they had chosen, Madrid decided that Cerda's plan would be the one that was carried out.
Madrid said, okay, you can do the competition, but I have to say who is the winner at the end. I mean, I have to protect my opinion, right?
I know it's maybe strange to say given the circumstances, but I think Madrid made the right choice.
I always said that thanks to Cerda, Barcelona is in the most important books of history of architecture.
It looks different than anywhere else in the world, especially in 1859. The first thing you probably notice is the chamfered corners on the blocks. These were designed to fit a wide turning radius for whatever the future of transit might bring. Cerda even wrote of the private locomotion carriages that will undoubtedly appear in the future.
There were no cars at that moment. We only have the chariots with the horses. So it's interesting to see how he was thinking ahead of his time, no?
These chamfered corners weren't just for traffic, though. Their purpose was also to open up a square and create a commercial and social space. And this is what makes Cerda's plan so impressive. He wasn't just drawing where the streets would go, but he was holistically considering what the entire experience of living in that space would be like. And he was doing this informed with the data and information he'd collected in the old town. He was now calculating what he thought would be the ideal amounts of sunlight, or the ideal amount of fresh air, or the proximity to necessary services. He came up with this complex formula that made his calculations look more precise than they probably were. But he used this to calculate what the city should be based on his belief that each person needed 6 square meters of fresh air. After putting this through his formula, he got the size of a block, or what he would call a manzana, to the precise measurement of 113.3 meters by 113.3 meters. Because of this holistic approach, it led him to design the buildings on the blocks and how those buildings would be oriented.
Mira, look, this house and this one, this was designed by Cerda. So here we have the only 2 examples of houses that were made in 1863 following the ideas of Cerda for the working class, we can say, no? As you see, are houses of 4 levels, inside divided in different apartments. So he thought that all Barcelona, all the blocks of houses had to be 20 meters high. Why? Because he designed the streets 20 meters wide.
By making the buildings no higher than the width of the street, Cerda ensured that the first floor of many of the buildings would stay in the sunlight when the sun was at 45 degrees or higher. And even during the winter, the sunlight would reach most of the building. Then he oriented all of the blocks to be at a 45-degree angle from the meridian. This way he equalized the amount of sunlight that all of the streets would get, rather than some being perpetually dark and others perpetually light. The orientation is clear when you see that this street runs north-south and this street runs east-west. These diagonal roads Cerda made to connect each of the villages and enable quick transit across the entire city, with the added benefit of creating a new city center. By the way, this road that doesn't really match the pattern existed before the plan and is the main link to Gracia. Then he took it a step further. Now he could orient the buildings however he wanted on these blocks and still be maximizing for sunlight and airflow.
For example, some blocks that were cut in the middle by a street in order to put different small houses, well, no, not small houses, but houses, entire houses for wealthy people. No? In the same area that maybe next to it, like happened here, no? We have blocks of 4 levels for working people, for the working class. So he thought in different typologies of blocks also in order to have different kind of people living in it.
The most common would be 2 buildings across from each other, but he also configured them to form corners, and on some of them he would put 3 structures, but still allow for a walking path through it.
But the majority of the plan was only 2 sides. This means that inside all the rest of the block, inside and outside, was garden. So imagine Barcelona with all these gardens around, all these green areas around.
If you trace the paths created by the open spaces on these blocks, you can start to see a larger pattern. The idea was that regardless of where you live in the city, you would have close access to everything you need. He planned to do this by creating districts that were 10 blocks by 10 blocks. Each of these would have a public building. Then each of those sections would be divided into a 5 by 5 section. And those would each get a church, and ideally a park.
The idea is very uniform. But it's true that he, thinking about these different social classes, developed different houses.
He was working against a handful of real-world constraints, but you can see his effort to make this a reality. He also made a plan to cut several streets through the old town and open it up, but only one of those was ever completed.
Right? It's called Via Laietana. And this was not made neither in the time of Cerda. This was later. They begin in 1904, Via Laietana, and until the 50s, it was finished.
It took a long time.
A long time, yeah.
Why did it take so long?
Mira, at the end, a lot of expropriations had to be made because you have to think that all this was plenty of small streets, again, medieval streets and properties, no, houses of people, and that all these had to be demolished in order to open all this. And also they profit to do the metro underneath. Making the Eixample is easy because there is nothing there. But here you have people living.
This is actually really hard to do, and is the reason that it's easier to create a street than to erase one. But the gardens he envisioned in the city are now just a rare exception. Most of the blocks are filled with car parks or other buildings. Despite how much we might appreciate this plan today, the locals didn't like it.
They didn't like that he was not an architect, he was an engineer. They didn't like that the plan was not radial, because this was the fashion at the time. And apart from that, it's true that this hypodamic plan, no, this monotony, they didn't like. So this was also a problem, yeah.
His plan wasn't just the buildings and the layout of the city and the integration to the old town. It was also a legal implementation of how much could be built on each block. Cerda's plan prioritized the health and well-being of the residents, not the profits of the real estate. While the city adopted most of the elements of his plan, they did not ratify this real estate aspect to it, which was slowing the construction of these blocks. And because of that, most blocks were built in on all four sides as well as their center. This also loosened the height restrictions for how tall the buildings could be, which again affected the light within the city. There have been a couple notable alterations to his plan. First is Citadel Park. And second, the church in this district was moved to this plot of land, and almost 150 years later, the Sagrada Familia is still under construction. How about that, huh? Look at that thing. So just this week, the Sagrada Familia officially became the tallest church in the world.
Yeah.
Which you've seen be constructed in front of your house.
Yes.
Your whole life, right?
Yeah. As I was there from the terrace of my apartment seeing the Sagrada Familia growing and growing, sometimes I think that maybe it's for this reason that I like art and architecture, no? And at the end, I do that because it was every day, yeah, growing and growing and growing.
Regardless of the departure from his wishes, Cerda left his mark. He went on to write The General Theory of Urbanization, where he coined the term. Cerda is buried on Mount Montjuic, and he rests under an engraving of his plan that moved the world forward. Over the last 20 years or so, there's been a renewed appreciation for and effort to go back to the principles of Cerda's plan. But that's a task just as difficult as carving a new road through an old town. If you weren't already planning on it, I highly recommend getting on Google Maps and flying around Barcelona in 3D. It's amazing. You feel like a god. I'm also going to link this really cool website that shows the development of Barcelona over time. And I want to know if you guys find anything interesting on either of these maps that I didn't see. Thanks again to KiwiCo for sponsoring this video. Their link is at the top of the description. And a huge thank you to Judy for helping me on this video. Obviously, she rocks. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in another one.